Hi.
Hey guys.
How you
It's so
doing?
good to see y'all.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I'm a little tired because last night I was on Dr. Kiltz's morning show, and for me, it's from 2 to 3 a.m.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't sleep. I just stayed awake. I figured if I go to sleep, I will sleep through it. I'll never even wake up. So I just stayed up and yeah, so I'm a little tired. I did sleep though afterwards, so I just let myself sleep as long as I needed to. So I think I got a good night's sleep. It's just that it was at weird hours. So
Yeah.
I'm a little sleepy from that, but
Well,
anyways.
that's understandable.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know it's not, I mean, I haven't been on his show before, and I figured, well, I can do this every once in a while, or maybe once. We'll see how.
Yeah.
We'll just see
That's
how it
awesome.
goes. But yeah. So anyways, anything new with you two?
Just a lot of work. Basically, a lot of work. I don't remember. I did go to a show. It's Josh Turner I saw him with my brother, but I don't know. I don't think we had gotten together after I'd gone to that show, but it was a lot of fun. He was a country guy that was popular like in the early 2000s, like more of a traditional country type person. And it was great. The show was fantastic. And I really didn't know that much about him. I recognized a couple of his songs because I just heard them, but I really didn't know much about him. So my brother introduces me or like acquaints me with, a lot of things that I normally don't listen to. So that's good. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. And how about you, Kim?
I've just been working and that's about it. Not a whole lot.
Yeah. All right. Good deal. Awesome. Well, anyways, we are here to go through this textbook. It is Ketogenic, the Science of Therapeutic Carbohydrate Restriction in Human Health. If you're new watching this is not a book club, so we don't read ahead with the study group. So we actually are reading and discussing as we go. And we are on chapter 3. We have been doing this for a very long time. It is taking a while. But we are on chapter 3, which is the chapter on endocrine. And I am trying to think if I needed to copy slides. I don't think I'm going to need slides for this one. So I'm going to have to remember to start making some slides. But we're on this section on fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And I know last time I didn't read, so I guess I'll start off this time.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is section 2.3.3, sorry, 2.2.2.3, fatty liver. And is this still the one? Oh, Dr. Robert Sewis wrote this section, and I think last time we were a consensus, it was pretty high level. So yeah, it's very, very technical. So I know that, I don't know about you guys, but it was a little bit of a challenge for me to follow some of the stuff he was saying. So let's hope, fingers crossed, that this is going to make sense to us, but we'll see. Okay. So NAFLD, which is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or steatosis, is accumulation of macrovesicular fatty triglyceride globules within hepatocytes, and hepatocytes are the liver cells. Steatosis is visible via microscopy on biopsy or visualized by radiologic imaging as a change in the density of the liver. NAFLD can progress to inflammatory fatty liver disease, or NASH, that results in permanent hepatic injury via fibrosis, which is scarring. Diagnosis is based on medical history supported by blood tests, medical imaging, and liver biopsy. The human liver does not ordinarily store lipids, so that all forms of hepatic steatosis are the consequence of pathophysiology. Although there are several contributing factors, the origin has been divided into alcoholic fatty liver disease, or AFLD, and NAFLD. Contributing factors including CECC, and that was the eating too many carbs. Was that what that was? Do you guys remember what
Chronic
that stands
excessive carbohydrate consumption.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Viruses such as hepatitis C, human immunodeficiency virus, which is HIV, inborn errors of metabolism, a beta lipoproteinemia, glycogen storage diseases, lipodystrophy, Weber-Christian disease, and drugs like amiodarone methotrexate and diltiazem, etc. Clinical experience reflects that fatty liver is a common feature in persons who regularly consume carbohydrates as greater than 60% of their total daily caloric intake in an acute or CECC manner. Okay, so there's pictures here, but I don't know that these pictures are really helpful to share necessarily, because you can't, you can see the kind of a granularity as the liver gets more and more fat in it. It becomes more mottled, and you can see it goes from being nice and smooth, a continuous color, to more of a mottled texture with some more white in it as it becomes more fatty. And it almost looks like there's little cysts or something on that. But
Yeah,
You know what it looks
so-
like? It's like the side of someone's tongue.
It
has
does.
like inflamed taste buds in that last picture. And then it also
does.
looks like the vasculature to the liver. You can tell it's kind of struggling too, because the vessels are more prominent.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, they
So
do.
each
That
row-
does look like a tongue with canker sores.
Yeah.
Let me
And
show.
each row, it's like showing it getting worse. Like the top row is the normal liver. Then the middle row is non-alcoholic fatty disease liver without fibrosis or inflammation. Then the bottom row is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis progressing to fibrosis and cirrhosis. And so, boy, you can really tell, like on that one on the bottom right.
That one.
Yeah. That's the one you were talking about, looking like the tongue. Yeah.
And see that vasculature right there? See the blood vessels at the bottom?
Well, and what happens is, the liver is there's so much vasculature in the liver. There's a ton of blood flow through the liver, and so the top picture, it's very red, and it's probably it has excellent blood perfusion. But with all of the fat, you can see it's so much more white on the bottom. And what happens with the scarring is that you end up getting back at the portal hypertension. The vessels,
you can tell those vessels are congested.
They're congested.
Which is what happens with portal hypertension too.
Exactly. And your other vessels will develop like collateral vessels, branch up. They're very weak. They can burst. So there's it definitely affects your vasculature, not just the liver. Okay, so NAFLD triglyceride accumulation occurs due to several factors. Postprandial liver is a primary producer of lipid, cholesterol, triglyceride, phospholipid by DNL, and I forget what DNL means. Do you guys remember?
De novo lipogenesis.
There we go. I knew that last week.
Kim.
Good. At least one of our brains is always working.
Maybe the three of us
put my glasses up. I need a piece of tape right here.
Yes, you do.
So under the influence, so it's producer of lipids, all these different lipids under the influence of insulin, and the capacity for de novo lipogenesis is not rate limiting. So depending on the volume of CECE or excess carbohydrate consumption and frequency or snacking of substrate from the intestine, the liver can produce lipids, particularly from carbohydrates. Let me just make sure. Okay. Let's see, where was I? Proof comes from the high concentration of palmitic and oleic fatty acids in the liver that are the direct product of glucose lipogenesis. So number 2, this is another factor that affects the accumulation of triglycerides. There is little evidence that the liver releases free triglyceride or non-esterified fatty acids into the blood directly. The primary exit for lipids is via insulin-mediated VLDL production, and lipid accumulation results when this rate-limiting step is exceeded by the DNL production. So 3, somatic lipid influx into the liver comes from chylomicron remnants, HDL and LDL, which we're familiar with. This mechanism is the focus of most research that erroneously ignores CECC, de novo lipogenesis, and blames saturated fat intake as the cause of NAFLD. And 4, the liver has a high capacity for free triglyceride and NAFA uptake that is blood concentration regulated, and during fasting is the most active metabolic organ, metabolized triglyceride/NAFA. This occurs in 3 pathways. So 1, complete oxidation, producing water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. 2, incomplete oxidation, producing ketones. And 3, esterification to triglycerides and phospholipids. Fasting triglyceride/NAFA concentration is normally dependent on adipocyte release. Under insulin-resistant conditions, paradoxical triglyceride/NAFA and lipid-laden LDL release occurs despite postprandial anabolic hormonal conditions. This elevates the NAFA concentration that induces hepatic gradient-based uptake, adding somatic lipids to the already lipid-laden hepatocyte. These processes culminate in NAFLD, the driving force being CECC and insulin resistance. Does that make sense to you guys, or is that kind of complex?
I think the general idea in the let's see. So like the last one, for example, is talking about there are 3 ways that the liver has a high capacity for free triglyceride and NAFA uptake. And then it says through complete oxidation and ATP, producing water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. That's a lot. I'm trying to think of a way to simplify that. Do you guys have any ideas? I mean, I think I sort of get the gist. But then, of course, the main thing at the end of number 4, though, it says these processes culminate in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the driving force being high carb intake and insulin resistance. I mean, that's pretty... Yeah. I mean, I think that sums it up probably.
Yeah, I think the takeaway is that eating too many carbs and being insulin resistant creates, causes the liver to store fat. There's several ways it does it, which are probably maybe above what our understanding is.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is eating too many carbs and being insulin resistant is the driving factor for this.
Yeah, because it's this line here, fasting triglyceride and NAFA concentration is normally dependent on adipocyte release, but then that doesn't happen when there's insulin resistance, and therefore it causes the fat to build up.
I feel like you need to read number 4 again.
Okay, I can do that.
That
Okay.
might be a good idea because I got the gist of the first three, I think, but 4.
Yeah, a lot of big words and acronyms. Okay, so I'll read number 4 again. The liver has a high capacity for free triglyceride and NAFA uptake that is blood concentration regulated, and during fasting is the most active metabolic organ to metabolize triglycerides / NAFA. So
Okay,
blood
so when you
concentration
fast,
regulated. So it sounds like blood concentration regulated would be depending on the amount of fats in your blood. It determines how much it uptakes the triglycerides, which would make sense.
So NEFA is what
Is the
non-esterified fatty acids.
That's what I was saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, that's why it's good to fast, because during fasting, you're actually burning, in a sense, that fat from your blood and then it will pull from your body if you fast long enough, right?
Yeah. So while you're fasting, it's the most active organ to metabolize the fats.
Yeah.
So fasting is really important, especially if you already have the fatty liver disease, to get rid of the fats. Okay, so I think we understand the first sentence. Okay, so this occurs, so it's talking about 3 pathways. So there's 3 pathways. Now, is this 3 pathways, your guys' understanding, the 3 pathways by which it uptakes the fats or by which it metabolizes the fats?
I think it's metabolizes. And then it's metabolizes because it's breaking the fat down to the products that can be used, basically.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That was confusing to me because the last sentence it talked about both uptake and metabolism. So it wasn't clear which one this is talking about. So let's just talk about metabolism. So breaking down and utilizing the fat.
Yeah, and that's because you're fasting. If you weren't fasting, then you might be uptaking.
Right.
Because you're either breaking down or you're building. You're not. You can't do both at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm pretty sure. I say that with authority, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I know.
We're going to decide that we're the authority.
Yes. Let's take a vote.
Okay, so there's nobody here to say any difference.
There's no one to argue with us. No. So we're giving ourselves our own stamp of approval on this one. Okay, so the first pathway is complete oxidation. So the byproducts of complete oxidation would be water, carbon dioxide, and ATP. So I would assume that means that fat molecule is then completely metabolized and oxidized into components that we can use in the body. Water, CO2, and ATP, which converts to, which is
so I think the water and the CO2 are just kind of the byproducts that from the breaking down, but the ATP is what you're actually using as energy.
Yes. So which is a healthy function, I'm assuming, because that's what we want to do, right? Your liver wants to utilize the fat that we can use it for energy. So that is to me, I see that as a functional, healthy pathway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so number 2, with incomplete oxidation, producing ketones. I don't see that as a bad thing either. What do you guys think?
So this reminds me of the video that we watched of Dr. Ben Bickman, the 3-hour-long video that we've been talking about, because what happens is you only need so much energy. And at that point, the fat that your body's getting is going to be producing ketones from that. And then those will be eliminated from your body. Those can be,
they can be used
either used or eliminated, what you don't need,
Mm-hmm. So like when you get that acetone breath.
Yeah.
But basically this means you have an excess amount of fat that it's trying to break down.
Yeah, because he was talking about like how you expel it, like you can sweat it out or you can breathe it out. or exhale, you know.
Yeah. And the ketones are used as a fuel source and energy source.
Mhm.
So, so that video that Kim's talking about, for anyone who those are watching, is just this past week. It was on the Diary of a CEO, and he interviewed Ben Bickman. It was a fabulous interview. It was long. It was almost 3 hours. Incredibly detailed. Yes, he allowed Ben Bickman to all the time he needed to answer the questions, as much depth as he needed, and it was so good. So check that out. Okay, so that is pathway number 2. And then the third pathway is esterification, which ester is an alcohol. Isn't that what esterification is? Is converting it to alcohols?
I believe
Am I
you're
wrong
right.
on that? We can look that up. Although it says it's esterification. Yes. Okay. So it's converting
it says esterification is a chemical reaction that produces an ester and water when an alcohol and an acid are combined. It's a key reaction in organic chemistry with many applications, including production of biodiesel, flavors, fragrances, and pharmaceuticals. And evidently in your body.
And apparently your liver does it too. Yes, apparently your liver does it too. So it converts basically the fats to triglycerides and phospholipids, which I know triglycerides can be problematic if you have too many of them. As far as
but this is why also that they say don't get your triglycerides checked too soon into the keto diet, because initially they're going to be higher where you're breaking down all that fat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So these are so this makes a lot more sense when I'm reading it as these are how our liver actually breaks the fat. So that does make more sense. I'm glad we're going over this again. Okay. So fasting triglyceride, non-esterified fatty acids. Concentration is normally dependent on adipocyte release. Okay, so that makes sense, because when you're fasting, if your body's producing or metabolizing the fat into triglycerides and NEFAs, the concentration would be dependent on how much of the fat is being released. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So under insulin-resistant conditions, paradoxical triglyceride, NEFA, and lipid-laden LDL release occurs despite postprandial anabolic hormonal conditions. Okay.
So postprandial meaning after eating.
After eating. Okay.
And anabolic meaning building up, right? I always have to think about that. Anabolic steroids. Yeah. So So after eating, basically growing hormonal conditions, or building up hormonal conditions. I need to look at the actual definition, because I always refer to it as a building up, but the actual definition is marked by promoting metabolic activity concerned with the biosynthesis of complex molecules relating to, characterize, or stimulating anabolism. Okay, it's giving me
That's not helpful at all.
It's
maybe you could ask AI to give you the version for dummies.
Anabolism is the process of building larger, more complex molecules from smaller ones.
From simpler. Okay.
Yes. Whereas
it's a constructive metabolism where your body's building things, right?
Yes. Yes. Whereas catabolism is the opposite. It's taking larger molecules and breaking them down into smaller molecules. So you're right. It's building
Yep,
up.
you were right.
Yes. So the postprandial anabolic hormonal conditions would mean that after eating, the conditions of building up.
Oh, okay. So the hormones
So,
are actually
under
building.
insulin resistant conditions,
Yes.
paradoxical triglyceride, NEFA, and lipid-laden LDA release occurs despite postprandial anabolic hormonal conditions.
So in other words,
Okay.
it's not working right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're insulin resistant.
So when you're insulin resistant, that's even more reason to not check your triglycerides and your LDLs, and not LDLs, your LDL and all the cholesterol and stuff, because during your period of insulin resistance, before you get it under better control, in other words, it's going to be like continuing to release, right? I don't know.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it'll just take time to adjust to your changes. So like even if you're starting out, on keto or carnivore, but if you're insulin resistant, it's just going to take time for it to regulate. So sometimes people will get their blood work drawn too soon, and then they're like, "Oh no, it's worse. I've been keto for a month."
Yeah.
And it's like
It's almost like your body is confused because it's
Uh-huh.
not working properly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just going to take some time.
Yeah. Okay, so this elevates the NEFA concentration that induces hepatic gradient-based uptake, adding somatic lipids to the already lipid-laden hepatocyte. So when I think of gradient-based uptake, I think about, we always learn about the sodium concentration, right? Water follows sodium. And so there's like an osmotic gradient where you're wanting to draw fluids into, one direction or other. So maybe this also is kind of the same situation, that if you have the high concentration of these non-esterified fatty acids, it encourages the liver cells to uptake more. Is that how you're seeing it? Adding more lipids?
Okay.
Making it worse, basically, making fatty liver even worse.
So like it temporarily makes the fatty liver worse because your body's just confused and doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, and it promotes it to take in even more when you're insulin resistant, to take even more lipids and store them there in the liver, which it should not be doing. Okay, I think that makes sense. So these processes culminate in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the driving force being the chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption and insulin resistance. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I feel like I understand that a lot better.
Okay, I'm glad we broke that down. So that was, that was a lot to understand for sure. And hopefully we got it. We'll see.
Okay, so this was not necessarily referring to when you're in ketosis, though.
No, I was just using that as an example.
But I think I had that in my mind, and then I was like, wait a minute. It's just talking about in general.
Well, and I think that it says the driving force is the, excessive carbohydrate consumption. So you're not going to be in ketosis if you're consuming it.
For some reason, I got kind of like.
Well, it did mention ketones because there's a incomplete oxidation producing ketones, esterification to triglycerides and phospholipids.
So I think that's the reason why I got that in my brain. But actually, I mean, a normal person produces ketones from time to time too,
So I think this was saying that it occurs normally in 3 pathways, but then later it talks about how it goes wrong under insulin resistant conditions.
Okay.
It's just that the correct way isn't broken. I would think it'd be helpful to have like a separate paragraph there because it told about normally it occurs this way. but then now this is what
Yeah.
happens when it's not right. And I think we kind of
Yeah.
had that same issue before where we were kind of confused as to what scenario we were looking at. Like, is it where it's working right or working wrong or
Yeah.
And also where I got that from was where it said fasting.
Yep.
Like I kind of ran with that, I think. So it doesn't
Right.
necessarily, it doesn't mean that like your fatty liver gets better when you're first on a ketogenic diet. That wasn't right. So
Yeah, I noticed when he writes this section in that he's not saying he's not giving those us those little phrases to lead us in the right direction, like under healthy conditions or under, you know, low carb eating conditions, this is the way it works, or when your liver's functioning properly, this is what should happen.
yeah.
But he just talks about, well, this is happening, and then he says under insulin resistant conditions. So you have to go back and reread it and go, oh, okay. So the other was not under insulin resistant conditions. You find that out later. So it would have been helpful. Yeah, it would have been helpful if he had said, you know, for those who are not insulin resistant, this is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you're in medical school and you're learning this, it makes sense, but we are not in medical school.
Yeah, like I think most of these people reading this book are probably already doctors.
Probably.
At the very least. At the very least.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I got my MD from YouTube University, so
I know
it's
just
not
the
exactly, you know, on the up and up, right?
Yes, we're just a little crazy tackling this for ourselves without the preliminary education, but that's okay. We're getting it. All right. So in FLD, blood glucose is elevated, and somatic cells lower non-esterified fatty acid use and increase glucose use under insulin. Thus, there is greater non-esterified fatty acid concentration in blood, and the liver develops a futile cycle to convert non-esterified fatty acid to triglyceride into very low density lipoproteins. So this is the dysfunctional cycle. Thus, fatty liver is a combination of de novo lipogenesis and recycling of non-esterified fatty acids that should have gone into cells. Okay, so they should have gone into the cells to feed your whole body, but instead they're ending up being stored in your liver.
Yep.
Okay, so decreasing
is that because like, you know, that example of like the full train cars where it's like pushing, like it's already pushed a ton into the cells, and like the liver is kind of like the last stop where, you know, it just that's the only place left it has to push it.
And it may be too that because you're talking about an insulin resistant state, maybe it's not getting into the cells because the cells are resistant.
Well, the cells are full. Like you were saying, the cells are full. They were, you know, the insulin was trying to push it in, and cells are like, you know, and so it has to go back to the liver. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But wait a minute. I'm thinking about sugar, and this is fat.
Yeah. This is fat.
So that's what it does with sugar.
Yeah.
Like with
glucose.
Fat.
But the glucose ends up being fat in your liver, though. I mean, that's what causes you to get fatty liver is having high sugar.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, it does relate.
We need to take a chemistry class next.
Yeah,
I know.
Biochemistry. I've already taken it once. I need a big refresher.
So, okay, so it does say blood glucose is elevated. And somatic cells lower the use of the fatty acids and increase glucose use under insulin. So there's greater Okay, so they're not utilizing the fatty acids very well when your glucose is elevated. That's what I'm reading. So there's greater concentration in blood. Okay. And there's a futile cycle of the liver trying to convert it, but it can't. So it accumulates because there's more of it.
So
So
everything is
fatty
just
acid
like
is a-
packed out.
it sounds
And
like
the
it
liver's just
exceeds,
like, what am I supposed to do with this?
well, it sounds like there's so much in your bloodstream that it exceeds
Dr.
the liver
Nelson,
capacity. Oh, Dr. Nelson, maybe you can help us.
come on
This is
in.
really
Hey, Dr. Nelson.
complicated. Yes, we're in a really complicated section here. So, so obviously the fatty acid, the free flowing fatty acid that's floating around in the system exceeds the liver's capacity to utilize it, and it ends up getting stored, is the way I'm reading it. So decreasing carbohydrate consumption decreases de novo lipogenesis and blood glucose that increases cellular non-esterified fatty acid use, reducing fatty liver. So decrease the carbohydrates. It decreases the de novo lipogenesis and the blood glucose that bumps up your free floating fatty acids. Okay, so basically,
I want to make it clear. I want to make it clear, just in case we didn't do this, that de novo lipogenesis is a metabolic process that converts carbohydrates, protein, sugar, and alcohol into fatty acids. So all these fatty acids floating around are a result of like the excess in these things, like carbohydrates, even protein, sugar, but probably I would say more carbohydrates and sugar. But anyway.
Okay. All right. So the non-esterified fatty acid release differs when fed or low or fasted high.
Okay. Look what Dr. Nelson said.
Okay. Glucose and insulin both halt fatty acid oxidation. Yes, so that was that pathway that we were talking about. The previous the paragraph was talking about is the pathways of breaking down
because you can't process both at the same time, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? And does it have something to do with the Randall cycle?
Oh God! Now she's we're gonna get into
You're gonna take us down a rabbit hole here. So basically when your glucose and your insulin so that's why when you fast, you're able to start to break these down, right? Because you're keeping your glucose, your insulin levels lower. It gives your body a chance to break down the fatty acids.
Yeah. And you have to have your glucose and your insulin low to burn fat, like period.
Yeah.
So no matter what diet you're on, if you don't have that period of, either fasting or just low enough to where, you stop to where those drop down, you will never burn fat.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just like when we read through Dr. Fung's book with the obesity code, where he was talking about just even eating just 3 meals a day, gives you at least some time in between. But, as we tend to graze all day, and that's what keeps people's blood sugar and their insulin high. So it's contributing to the obesity problem in this country. Okay. All right. Let's see. Now we're going through this slowly, but I guess it's okay. We're understanding.
Because I keep talking.
Trying to understand. Okay. So let's see. So snacking increases. Okay. So we read that part. The snacking increases the de novo lipogenesis and lowers the non-esterified fatty acid release until insulin resistance results in paradoxical adipocyte non-esterified fatty acid release despite high blood glucose. So even if your blood glucose is high, if you're insulin resistant, does it mean you're still going to have issues? So this is like a glucagon decoupling effect. This is really high level. So on a therapeutic carbohydrate restricted diet, hepatic de novo lipogenesis is low even postprandially or after eating. Okay, I'm going to assume that's good.
We're all like,
What page are you on? We are on page 111.
We are on page 111, mid-page. I guess we're on the end of the second paragraph.
Yeah, I posted the link in case you want us help.
Okay, I think you need to read this paragraph again, Lynn. I'm sorry. You're being punished this week for not reading last week.
I can see that. That's all right. Okay. So we'll go back to this one. So in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, blood glucose is elevated and somatic cells, let's define somatic.
Isn't it like the organs or?
Somatic cells refer to all the cells in the body that are
Oh, it's
not
just relating to the body.
production.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so somatic cells refer to all the cells in the body that are not involved in reproduction. They include all the cells that make up the organs, tissues, and systems of an organism, such as skin cells, muscle cells, basically all the cells. In contrast, germ cells, sperm and egg, are the reproductive cells that carry genetic information from parent to offspring. Okay, so basically when it says somatic, it's referring to every other cell in the body besides your reproductive cells. Okay, so I think it's important.
David Lavosky.
Oh, that's my husband.
Hello, hubby.
Yes, we are having fun trying to learn. This is why when we finish this, I have to go lay down.
Because your head hurts.
Because my head hurts.
All those words from college, from nursing school or floating in your head. It's like, I thought I was beyond this. I thought I never thought I would have to.
Yeah, we didn't even cover most of this in nursing school.
Oh my goodness, no. Okay, so now that we know what somatics means, so a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, so this is a diseased liver, not a healthy liver, blood glucose is elevated and the rest of the cells of the body lower these non-esterified fatty acid use. Okay, let's see. Summary. Too much sugar. Cells making it too easy, Dr. Nelson.
Yeah.
That's right. An increased glucose use under insulin. Okay, so the other cells are not really using the fats, and then your glucose is going to increase. Okay. So thus there is a greater there's a greater fat concentration in the blood. The liver develops this futile cycle. Futile meaning pointless.
Yep.
Yeah.
Futile. It's trying really hard. It's on a treadmill. It's not getting anywhere.
You're not going to see. That's right. It has a pointless effort to convert these fats to triglyceride into very low density lipoproteins. So basically the liver is not able to convert the fats. Thus, the fatty liver is a combination of de novo lipogenesis and recycling. So it can't break them down, so it's got to recycle them, right? Of the fatty acids that should have gone into the cells, but because these other cells are not using them, it can't go in. All right, that makes sense. So when you decrease carbohydrate consumption, decreases the de novo lipogenesis and blood glucose. So it takes those both down. It increases the ability for the cells to use the fatty acids. That's how I'm reading it. Is that good?
Yeah.
Reducing fatty liver. So the fatty acid release differs. It's low when you're fed. It's high when you're fasted. So snacking likely increases your de novo lipogenesis, lowers the fatty acid release. Okay, so if you keep snacking, it's going to create this continual problem until you get insulin resistant, and then it results in basically rebound adipocyte fatty acid release despite high blood glucose. And it's okay. So it's basically saying that the glucagon uncoupling effect, does that mean that it just doesn't work anymore?
It's not related anymore, or it's not triggering.
It's not related anymore. Yeah. So you're basically taking all these things that are supposed to be functional and making them all unfunctional. And Dr. Nelson says resistance is yes.
Indeed it is.
Yes, it is. Okay. All right. So the next paragraph, clinical evidence of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is rectifiable. So you could fix it to clinical observed remission within 3 to 7 days of reducing carbohydrate intake to less than 10% of daily calories and reducing caloric intake frequently to no more than twice a day. So, Star Trek reference. I missed it.
Like, man, where did that come from? I recognized that. My mom used to watch Star Trek.
Yeah,
so did I. First I was thinking Star Wars, but then I was like, no, it's not a Star Wars reference.
Resistance is futile. And then, of course, I remember, any of y'all remember the Borg in Star Trek, where they were all the ones that were alike? And then there was this one episode where this one Borg girl, she like separated from the collective, and she became like, oh, it was awesome. But then she got sucked back in, and it was so sad. I just remember like, no. You can't go back to the collective. It was like she was in the Matrix. I mean, decades before the Matrix existed, that it was just wild. But then she got sucked back into it.
I never watched it, but I always would like just overhear parts of it when my mom was watching it.
The only one I watched was The Next Generation, Jean-Luc Picard. That's the one I watched. I didn't watch the later ones, but I was really hooked on that Next Generation one with Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah, the Next Generation one was really good, and I'm trying to remember which crew, because I only watched the original version and then the one with Jean-Luc Picard, and I can't remember now which one. I'm thinking it might have been the Next Generation. I mean, I think the Borg was mentioned before, but I think for her, the episode about that girl that got away from the collective, I think that was during the Next Generation. I'll have to see
because it's bringing up a memory for me. And on that, like I said, that's the only one I watched, so it might have been in the Generation. Yeah. So I liked that one because it was more of a sciencey one. It was there was a lot of science in that, and I'm such a science nerd. So
okay, speaking of science and interesting, this is getting interesting right here.
It is.
I know I'm nerdy, but what she just said was very interesting.
About the clinical? Yes. Okay. Yes. So you can experience a remission of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease within 3 to 7 days of reducing carbohydrate intake to less than 10% of daily calories. Now, that's not reducing your carbohydrate intake by 10%. It's making sure it's less than 10% total of your daily calories. So for most people, that's going to be a very dramatic decrease in carbohydrates. Yes.
Yeah.
And reduce and caloric intake.
Just think about it. If you're on a 2,000 calorie diet, right? I mean, let's just say 2,000 for easy numbers, right? what, that would have to be less than 20, or is that, or no,
That'd be
200,
200.
200, sorry, I
200
can't
calories.
remember,
Yeah.
evidently.
Yeah. 200 calories of
It's not a
carbs.
mathematician.
Yeah.
200.
Yeah, exactly.
So 200
And
calories
eating
of
what?
carbs
Right.
and eating twice a day instead of,
And
which
eating
I've
no
always
more than
thought
twice a day.
naturally, like that just naturally feels right, you know?
Yeah.
To eat
Yeah.
twice a
I
day.
generally eat twice a day for the most part.
Yeah. So he says this
Sometimes I
is
eat
true for
breakfast.
alcohol. It's also true for alcoholic fatty liver disease when the person is
Oh.
abstinent from alcohol. The position that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is a direct result of excessive carbohydrate consumption is not universally accepted because cognitive dissonance combined with erroneous assumption of hepatic triglyceride accumulation assigning cause to saturated fat consumption. Well, we know there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in the medical
We
community
sure do.
regarding fat.
And they love to blame saturated fat for just
They
damn near
do.
everything.
They do. Absolutely. So, okay. So obesity does not cause non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption results in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that over time results in obesity as a disease continuum, starting with the chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption.
That makes
A lack
sense.
of a lack of appreciation of loss of hormonal cycling because of insulin resistance due to chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption has led to a large body of erroneously collaborative studies performed in insulin resistant patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that further reinforces the role of saturated fat consumption as the cause of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So basically, there's a bunch of bad studies that got everybody thinking that it's a saturated fat, which we know. We read Nina Teicholz's book.
Yeah.
So they're not appreciating. I think a lack of appreciation is a very nice way of saying ignorance, but ignorance of the loss of hormonal cycling because of insulin resistance. Because I mean, think about it. Insulin is a hormone, right? And so once you get one hormone that's not working properly, your other hormones aren't working properly either. And it just messes up your whole body. So yeah. Okay. Okay. I always lose track of where I left off. Okay,
I
so
know
for example,
these are some big blocks of text.
they are. So for example, tracer studies of ingested fat. So that means they put a tracer, like a radioactive tracer in the fat. They have you eat it, and that way they can radiographically trace it as it goes through your body. That's what that means. Tracer study of ingested fat demonstrate that much of the fat comes from adipocytes in the form of fasting non-esterified fatty acids. So 59% of it comes from there versus postprandial de novo lipogenesis, which is 29% in already insulin resistant subjects. Okay. So what's the significance of that?
So in other words, what it's saying is most of the fat's coming from breaking down your fat cells as opposed to
the fat you eat.
breaking down the carbs that you would be eating and making
or the fat that you eat.
Fatty acids out of that.
Yeah, so they had them eat fat that was they're looking to see is it so what they're saying is they ate the fat and then they found that the fat comes from your own fatty tissue, the fat, not the fat you ate. That's why it
Oh,
sounds
Yeah.
we talked about this, that we've
Yes,
talked
we
about
did.
having problems with this before where
Ding,
we were like, what? Like, so if you're eating fat, like, wouldn't it not break down your fat? But what this is saying, it sounds like, is that that even that when you're ingesting fat, actually more fat comes out of your adipocytes. Does that make, instead of
Mm-hmm.
being broken? I don't know. Does that make sense? Am
It
I
just
reading that
sounds-
right?
It just sounds to me like it showed you can't blame the fat you ate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I hope that's right. That's what it sounds like to me.
And it's talking about breaking down, right?
Well,
Like-
let's see. Let's check this out. Okay. Tracer studies of ingested fat demonstrate that much of the fat comes from adipocytes in the form of fasting. Let's see.
Non-esterified
Fasting.
fatty acids.
Okay, the fasting non-esterified fatty acids. So what those are, what ones were there when you were fasting versus postprandial de novo lipogenesis, 29% in already insulin resistant subjects. So it's telling me that something isn't okay. So is it saying DNL in already insulin resistant subjects?
I mean, de novo lipogenesis is making fatty acids out of things you eat, like carbohydrates, sugars, proteins, and like sugar alcohols or whatever.
So there
But
was
I'm
less
trying to figure out what this is trying to say. So
I
it
know.
sounds like it's talking about people who are already insulin resistant. So then something must not be working correctly.
And I thought I understood it until it threw that
I
thing,
did
that little
too.
tail on
Yes.
the end where it
So
says
now I'm
in
confused
already.
again.
Okay.
But maybe not because someone who's insulin resistant, which pretty much I was when I started the carnivore diet, I don't think that being insulin resistant should necessarily mean you're not metabolizing the fat that you eat properly, because it actually helps you.
Because
So
you don't have to. Well, no, that's not true.
yeah,
I know. I'm just like, wait a minute, because I was like right there. I was so close.
I'm like, okay, I feel like we need to read the last part of this again, like starting with the obesity does not cause.
Okay, so let me go back and
Read,
okay,
Lynn, read.
Okay, you guys are putting me
Meg,
to work.
it's on you.
Yes. So obesity does not cause non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. All right. Now I know that, and it doesn't cause fatty liver disease. I remember when I was working as a GI nurse, I had another one of my nurses that I work with who was really, really thin. And here I was morbidly obese, and we had both recently had CT scans of our abdomen. She had fatty liver disease. I didn't. And I remember her looking at me like, really? Because there's this stereotype that, like, well, if you're obese,
Dr.
morbidly
Bickman
obese.
know what Dr. Bickman said about the body types.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That if you are the type that tends to accumulate subcutaneous fat, it's actually protective.
Mm-hmm.
It's towards your organs, whereas a lot of people who are really lean, they'll have more visceral fat, a different type of fat, more fat cells versus bigger fat cells, and they're more likely to get into a disease state without getting fat.
Mm-hmm.
Our fat protects us. So
yeah, they didn't
yes.
have very much leeway at all, really, when you look at
Right.
it.
Right, exactly. So, okay, so it says excessive carbohydrate consumption results in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease over Okay, so this is where it's saying you eat too many carbs. It results in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that over time will result in obesity. So it's not the obesity caused the fatty liver disease, it's the fatty liver disease over time will cause the obesity. Okay, as a disease continuum, starting with the excessive carbohydrate consumption. Okay, so a lack of appreciation of loss of hormonal cycling because of insulin resistance due to your carbohydrate consumption has led to a large body of erroneously corroborative studies performed in insulin-resistant patients with fatty liver disease that further reinforces the role of fat consumption as the cause of fatty liver disease. Okay, so maybe this is an example of a bad study. So,
yeah, erroneously corroborative studies performed in.
Oh, this is an example of a bad study. That's
yes,
the problem.
It's an example of a bad study.
That's the problem.
Yes.
That's where we were not understanding this.
We're going to have to read all this twice. We're going to have to read all this twice.
Yeah.
I can see.
So,
this is an example of a bad study. Okay.
For example, tracer studies of ingested fat demonstrate that much of the fat comes from adipocytes in the form of fasting non-esterified fatty acids versus postprandial de novo lipogenesis in already insulin-resistant subjects. So is that saying that study is just whack?
That's how I'm reading it now that we
read it now.
That's how I'm interpreting it now.
I'm reading it that way now too. So basically, yeah, they did their bad studies that they did. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Explanation.
Yeah, we might need to watch Dr. Bickman again.
We might need to. Yes. Let's see if we can get through this section. Do you guys want to start? When do you want to start? You want me to keep going?
Let's see. How far do we have? Okay, just to the next page. I mean,
so we got two paragraphs.
Go ahead and read through to the next.
Okay. All right. So alcoholic fatty liver disease and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease are caused by triglyceride overproduction. Okay. Easy to understand. This is a protective mechanism whereby the liver accelerates triglyceride conversion of excess alcohol and glucose. So this is cool. It's equating alcohol and glucose to causing the same thing, excess triglycerides, to protect the circulation. Okay. So normally, both glucose and ethanol are converted into cytosolic acetyl-CoA and enter the Krebs cycle via acetyl-CoA carboxylase for conversion into ATP or are stored as glycogen. Okay, so that's normally. However, this process generates NADH and increases the NADH to NAD plus ratio. Increased NADH blocks pathways into mitochondria, diverting to fatty acid synthesis, while decreased NAD plus results in decreased fatty acid oxidation under the influence of insulin. Okay, so I remember we read about the NADH, NAD plus in the chapter 2. And I'm trying to remember what we learned about it, but it's in the mitochondria. And so it sounds like it affects both fatty acid synthesis and fatty acid oxidation under the influence of insulin. So de novo lipogenesis occurs in the cytosol via pyruvate decarboxylase and alcohol dehydrogenase enzymes, converting ethanol to pyruvate to acetaldehyde, raising NADH. So uncoupling of cytosolic to mitochondrial transfer is the key step in lipogenesis. Insulin drives this process toward lipogenesis by phosphorylation of acetyl-CoA carboxylase. De novo lipogenesis is an intrinsic metabolic process that converts excess macronutrients to fat. Under normal physiological conditions, de novo lipogenesis in hepatocytes and adipocytes is synergistically regulated by signals from the peripheral tissues and the central nervous system. However, under pathophysiological conditions of chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption, the equilibrium between hepatocyte and adipocyte de novo lipogenesis is disturbed at both the receptor phosphorylation and transcription level, leading to increased de novo lipogenesis in the liver and decreased de novo lipogenesis in adipose tissues, which contributes to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Everything gets off kilter. Okay. Under most conditions, the liver is forced into excessive de novo lipogenesis, not only to deal with the postprandial micronutrients. So basically, you ate too much. Macronutrient load from the PV. Remind me what that is.
Oh, shoot, that was one that I had last week. What is that word?
Peripheral vascular, but I don't think it is. I think it was something else. Portal vein?
Portal vein?
Portal vein.
Yes, that makes sense because that's the vein going to the liver.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So contributes to, okay. Macronutrient load. So basically there's too much macronutrients in the portal vein. Also as part of the systemic hyperglycemia regulatory mechanism to take up and convert excess systemic glucose to fat. So under insulin resistant conditions, there is additional uncoupling of insulin glucose control with paradoxical gluconeogenesis in the face of hyperglycemia. And this adds to hepatic de novo lipogenesis and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Okay. So, I mean, that was a lot of chemistry, but it messes up your body's normal functioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one sentence in there that kind of caught my attention. De novo lipogenesis is an intrinsic metabolic process that converts excess macronutrients into fats. Now, it didn't say excess sugar and excess fat into fats. It said excess macronutrients. And macronutrients are protein, fat, and carbs.
Carbohydrates.
So that might answer one of my questions that I've always had about meat and carnivore. And that was, I felt like I wasn't losing enough weight, but I have a just huge appetite, right? I mean, I feel like I do. I never really tracked. That was another probably problem that I had. But I felt like I was not losing enough weight because I was eating too much protein. And that kind of suggests to me that could have been correct because you eat too much of any macronutrient and, it's going to interfere with you losing.
It makes me wonder though, too, if our perception of what too much is accurate or if it's not accurate, because
I mean, I didn't track, so
right, because somebody will say, well, it's really, you don't have to eat a whole lot of saturated fat to get too much, whereas with carnivore or keto, it's like, no, you need more. So the definition of too much fat is a lot different from a ketogenic perspective than from someone who's a vegetarian or a vegan or on the standard American diet even. Whereas, they'll say, oh yeah, you need a lot of carbohydrates, just like the government My Plate, right? They're going to have you load up on the grains and the fruits and the vegetables. And so they're defining how much of that macronutrient you need, but it's wrong.
Well, but the fact that I wasn't losing weight, I feel like I wasn't eating too little because I would have lost
Yeah.
weight, you know. And also,
Yeah.
I feel like my hormones. We know that my hormones were messed up, and because
Yeah.
every hormone affects the others, maybe
Yes.
that also played a factor in it.
Yeah.
But
And this is talking about how much it disrupts the cycle with your hormones and how much it affects you even on a mitochondrial level when that gets disrupted. So yeah, I mean, maybe you needed to increase your fat and decrease your protein potentially.
probably.
And you know,
I never really added a lot of fat to anything. Like I wasn't one of those people that would do the butter and the,
Mhm.
I
that's
just feel
so-
so much better when I have more fat. Like in general, I don't add fat to anything either. But if I eat something that's particularly fatty, like, big, thick cut fatty pieces of bacon, or, like the 70-30 ground beef, or the ribeye with a lot of fat. If I eat something like that, I can tell a difference. I can tell that I feel better. My energy levels are better. But I think I'm like Kim, I think I'm not getting enough fat in there. I think it's more of the protein.
Yeah.
I think that could be part of my issue.
Yeah.
Is I'm not upping that fat ratio. And it's not a natural thing for me to add fat. The only thing that I do that's different, I guess, than some people is like I do keep what me and Christy would call my bite butter in the refrigerator, just a bar of butter. And, so every now and then I'd go down to get a water and I would just take that out and take a big bite. But it was something I just kind of craved it. It was kind of that salty taste with the butter. But it wasn't like I was just intentionally dripping stuff in extra butter or, doing anything like taking beef fat or, tallow or something and adding extra or anything. So I've got to look into just things I can do.
Yeah.
And
I had my bite butter too. It had to be unsalted.
Tracking might help all of us. I don't know if you track, Lynn, but
I occasionally track for a few days just to see where I'm at. And it's really to see and make sure I'm getting enough fat because I'm less concerned, like I'm not eating any carbs, well, there's like one carb in an egg, but not getting any plant-based carbs. But it's to make sure I'm still getting enough fat. And I found that whenever I do track, I'm usually somewhere between 70 and 80% fat. Some days I'm more than 80%. And
I don't think I was ever.
So, and that's
like I probably wasn't ever above 50.
I'd say the same for me in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never
hormones.
Yeah. In my life, I've never trimmed fat off of anything. I've always liked the fat.
Yeah, same.
But it's just so I eat the fat that comes with it, I guess is my point. Like the eggs, I just eat the whole thing. The ribeye or the steak, I just eat the fat that comes with it. So I'm like you, Kim. I think I've like maybe hovered around 50% fat rather than. So I don't think I was really what you would call, well, I mean, high fat relative to everybody else and low carb. And I think maybe the fact that my fat isn't like high fat, like truly high fat, low carb. I think that might be an issue that I'm struggling with because my energy levels, especially this winter, have not been as good. I mean, and I've been kind of just trying to figure out why that is.
Yeah, well, maybe
it could have something to do with my hormones or lack thereof. It could.
That can definitely play a big factor.
I got tested and like I'm done. That season is over. I mean, I'm in menopause now. I suspected I was, but so yeah. I'm gonna be 59 next month in 2 weeks.
Oh wow, that's hard to believe.
I know.
Well, we had Dr. Bright on as an expert a a week ago for Saturday on Healing Humanity Life, and I happened to ask her a question, but I mentioned that, I had labs done, and the labs showed that, hormonally, I'm not in menopause yet. She actually said labs aren't the best way to know if you're in menopause. So,
Yeah, because you can go up and down.
Yeah.
Like,
there was some kind of a thing that that he tested. It wasn't like your estrogen or this, or there was some other, it was something that's like I'll have to dig it up and maybe
stimulating hormone or something. FSH.
Well, for me, it's hard because of PCOS, since I was in my early 20s, my FSH and luteinizing hormones have always been off. So it's like, based on that, I was probably always in menopause,
Yeah, there was something. There were 3 or 4 different things that he checked. And but anyway, basically the results of that just said, you're done. You've crossed the threshold.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I haven't had any traditional menopause symptoms, and so I don't know. Maybe I'm in menopause, but because I'm carnivore, I'm doing okay.
Eating low carb will stave off a lot of those symptoms. And Dr. Bright, I've heard her talking about that too. She'll say a lot of things that we attribute to menopause are actually more diet related symptoms, because I did notice that I would have hot flashes, but then when I would go back on low carb, this was a few years ago, before I ever tried carnivore. But when I would go back on low carb, it would just nip those hot flashes right in the bud.
Yeah.
So,
amazing. All right, one little last paragraph. Then we can wrap it up. Okay. All right. Clinical experience shows that the treatment of carbohydrate-induced non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's time to go to bed. All right. With strict therapeutic carbohydrate restriction is simple and rapid. So 3 to 7 days. There is no medication therapy, self-induced lifestyle disease. Listen to that. There is no medication therapy for self-induced lifestyle disease. While treatment with insulin sensitizing drugs transiently improves non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, such therapy has poor long-term value. Bariatric surgery may briefly improve non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but unless chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption, GLP-1 agonist medications by suppressing gluconeogenesis accelerates the process, but may be used ancillary. Did I read this right? This isn't sounding right. Bariatric surgery may briefly improve non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but unless the CCC GLP-1 agonist medications by suppressing gluconeogenesis accelerates the process. This doesn't sound right, but may be used ancillary to, but not as a substitute for therapeutic carbohydrate restriction. This sentence isn't written right. Is it just me?
I think
I agree. It sounds funny.
Yeah,
it's grammatically, it's missing. It's grammatically not correct. But unless GLP-1 agonist medications accelerate the process, it should be accelerate the process. Maybe that's it.
Okay, so what I think what we're having trouble with here is they've put too many like little qualifiers in here. So really, it just skip that by suppressing gluconeogenesis. We need to know that, but like that'll make the sentence.
It still doesn't
like in parentheses.
It still doesn't make sense because it basically says unless these medications accelerate the process, then he says, but may be used ancillary to, but not as a substitute for therapeutic. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think there's a period or something is missing. Something's not there.
But may be used ancillary. So basically, he's saying that although these medications can accelerate the process and they may be used, but they should not be used as a substitute for therapeutic carbohydrate restriction.
So in other words,
That-
even if you're doing the GLP-1s, you still need to watch your carbs.
You still need to. Yes, exactly. Abstinence from alcohol consumption accelerates fatty liver disease resolution. Okay. Woo!
Yeah,
That was a mouthful,
doozy.
Lynn.
Oh, wow. That was a lot. Okay.
Yes,
I was looking back over here. So is it saying clinical experience shows that the treatment of carbohydrate-induced non-alcoholic fatty liver disease with strict total carbohydrate reduction or therapeutic carbohydrate reduction is simple and rapid. So from 3 to 7 days.
Yep.
Yes.
I didn't realize it could be that quick. I mean, I knew that that was the best solution to getting rid of it. I didn't realize it could work that quick. Like if you truly do go down to 10% of your calories and eating 2 times a day, 10% of your calories being carbohydrate.
Yeah, that's one of the first things to resolve. And that will make you feel so much better just resolving that.
I just didn't realize it was that fast.
I've heard
amazing.
multiple studies about it, and like a lot of the low carb doctors talking about it, which is the only reason why I knew. But they say that's the last thing to happen is the fatty liver disease, but it's the first thing to go away. So it's like in reverse order.
And we did read above clinically observed remission is what's within 3 to 7 days. So pretty amazing.
Yeah. Like I have heard Dr. Berry talk about like how amazing the liver is and how regenerative it is. And that if you, that it'll take a lot of crap from you. I mean, literally
for a long time.
Well,
but then can heal if you give it a chance.
It's interesting because we used to do fiber scans where I worked because we did gastroenterology and hepatology. So the liver was part of the work that I did as a nurse. And so we used to do fiber scans, which is what was the non-invasive way to test for what's going on with the liver. You can detect cirrhosis, you can detect liver disease, the degree of fibrosis in the liver. And I know that just what you ate that day, like if you eat within a window prior to the test, can affect the results. So it's that like it can make the results inaccurate. So people had to fast for, I think it was 4 hours from what I can recall, and have only water. And actually, no, they had to fast, no water even. So even water could affect the results. So if it's that elastic in the results, I could see how if you dramatically change your diet over several days, you're going to see. So I would imagine that when they say it's clinically significant remission, they probably did a fiber scan, put them on this diet, and then did another one. Maybe even they did daily just to see over a period of time, and found that anywhere from 3 to 7 days is when people started seeing this remission, which is incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. So interesting. All right. Wow. Well, that was
a great discussion.
Yeah. My brain hurts.
Well, mine really too. I'm going to have to go back and look again. But I mean, I have a clearer understanding than if we hadn't gone back. Honestly, I'm just going to.
Yeah.
I think that was necessary. And also we needed to punish Lynn for not reading last week or last time.
That's okay. That's all right. So awesome. So are we going to be able to say that this is our new time?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. I'm in.
Yeah. It works for me. And it sounds like it works for you guys too. So, and it's not on a weekend. We didn't want to do a weekend. So Tuesdays. And for me, it's 4:30 p.m. And for Carrie, it's 6:30 p.m. And for Kim, it's 7:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Awesome.
More stair steps.
Or, I mean, the only thing I see in the future is like, I mean, I'm going to be on the same schedule for about 4 months, but
Okay.
after that, I don't know which day I'll have to work, but we'll see.
Well, that should give us time to get through chapter 3.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. I wonder how
Oh,
many
my
pages it is.
It's a long chapter.
With
So
big blocks of text.
Yikes.
yes, with big
Yeah.
text. It goes to
Oh my
page
gosh.
184, and we're on page 112.
Okay, I'm going to take out the parts that are just like references. This is how much more we have to.
Oh
get
my
through.
goodness.
It's
Remember
Gotta
that?
go.
This is the song
Yeah.
that never ends. Well, this is the chapter that never
It
ends.
never ends. That's right.
Yeah.
So-
So what we're going to have to do is on the days that we don't need to reread to understand it, we're going to have to be like, just get on it.
We're just going to be
And
doing this for the
chug
rest
on
of our
through.
lives.
We'll be like 97.
I'll be like, oh, Kim, I think we got it.
I'll be like, I don't know if I can read. My glasses aren't really.
Be like, where are my glasses? Oh, my head.
Oh, my
Actually,
goodness.
because
All right.
we're all going to be keto/carnivore, then at least we'll have good memories. It'll just maybe
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. we'll have good memories.
Awesome.
That's
Good.
all right.
Well, for
That'll
those
give
of
us
you
a
who are
good
still
excuse
here
to
with
hang out for
us,
the next 30 years.
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. Awesome. Good. Well, we have people that stuck with us, so that's good. Really appreciate it. And
Yep.
so it looks like we will be here again next week, plugging our way through the endocrine system. And glad you all were here to join us on this insane journey through this textbook.
Right?
Yes.
And
And
if
if we
nothing
said
else, you
something
can laugh at
stupid,
us.
and if we said something stupid, I mean, it's a live
Just
video.
make
We
it
can't
work
take
harder. That's right. All right. Well, thank you guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye.